Ah, very interesting question. So this is Norma, and I find that the best way is to really be present in the engagement of everyday activity. And so what I know is that the oldest ancestor that I may have, even beyond the time that I might even know the name of that person, that they would have stood outside and they would have looked at the sky, that they would have felt the grass or the dirt under their feet. That in the case of my ancestors, whether they were Native Hawaiian or the Chinese, they would have stood at the shoreline and they would have crouched and they would have watched for fish as they come. So they would have engaged in these kinds of simple activity. They may not have stood at a stove, but they would have stood on above a fire to boil water, to make their tea, to boil water in order to steep herbs, in order to make the kinds of medicine that would be necessary. And so when I make my tea, or when I cook my food, when I cook rice, when I pick the taro, when I stoop to see a flower, that these would be things that my ancestors would do. And if I am completely in the activity of that, if I just do that, then what I will do is I will access ancient memory. Now, if at that moment I begin to think about it, I will lose it. And so it would be really important for me to just be in that activity. I need not even do it just as my ancestor did, but they would have stopped and they would have done these things. They would have washed clothes, they would have prepared food, they would have cleaned the space that they lived in. They would have stopped to hear the laughter of children and babies, even if they were not their own. And those would be things that would help me access the most ancient of memories. Friends, I see that there aren't necessarily any other questions that you might have, but please feel free to go ahead and ask them. Ask them in the chat, and we will continue along our way a bit, and we will do our best basically to come back into the questions that you might have. This is normal, and it is really important to ask the questions when they are rising so that you do not stay in your head and you open yourself to the experience of whatever it is that is unfolding in front of you. You know, creating the world that we want to have is so very, very much dependent upon us being able to come into change and transformation. And this change and transformation allows us to be able to understand how it is to create into the new worldview.